Rikers Island uncovered. What no one will tell you. The night, the alarms never stopped. The sirens wailed so loud they shook the walls. Guards ran in every direction, radios crackling, boots pounding against the concrete floor. Inmates banged on their bars, some screaming in panic, others laughing like they had been waiting for this moment all along. One cell door stood wide open. A man, his face covered in sweat, stood frozen in the middle of the corridor. He wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't supposed to be free. Yet here he was, staring at the gates of Rikers Island like he was about to make the impossible happen. How did he get that door open? Who helped him? And more importantly, would he actually make it out alive? Behind the walls of the forgotten city. Before that night, before the chaos, Rikers Island was already known as a world of its own, a place hidden in plain sight between the Bronx and Queens, where New Yorkers whisper about it but never dare to step inside. Every day, thousands of men and women woke up inside its walls, but the rest of the city acted like they didn't exist. Guards kept secrets. Inmates had codes. And the truth about what really happened on that island rarely made it past the razor wire. On some days, things seemed normal. Trays of food rolled down the halls, cells open for showers, and prisoners traded jokes across the tiers. But underneath that routine, something darker was always bubbling. Rival gangs plotted in whispers. Guards turned blind eyes, and small sparks of tension could set off a fire at any moment. That night of the alarms didn't come out of nowhere. It was a result of weeks of pressure building in silence, waiting to explode. And when it finally did, no one inside Rikers could pretend it was just another day. The boiling point. It started with something small. A fight in the cafeteria over a piece of cornbread. 2 inmates throwing punches while others cheered. Guards rushed in, batons swinging, dragging the men away. On the surface, it looked like just another prison fight. But for the men trapped inside, it was more than that. That single punch was a signal. A reminder that no matter how much order the guards tried to enforce, chaos was always one heartbeat away. The whispers spread fast. Someone was planning something bigger. Contraband phones buzzed under bunks. Eyes watched every guard's move. Rumors said keys were being copied. Doors could be opened. And maybe, just maybe, a man could break free. The tension grew thicker each day. And by the time the sirens began to wail, Rikers wasn't just a jail anymore. It was a ticking time bomb. And when it went off, the whole island shook. The breaking point. The day began quietly. Prisoners shuffled through the corridors, trays clattering with watery eggs and burnt toast. Guards leaned against the walls, tired eyes half closed, as if nothing could happen. But silence in Rikers never lasts. By the afternoon, tension cracked. In one block, a fight erupted over a smuggled cigarette. 2 gangs squared off, shouting across the tier, their voices echoing off the concrete. Guards rushed in, swinging batons, trying to restore control. Inmates pounded on their doors, chanting, "Let them fight! Let them fight!" Then it happened. A guard slipped. His keys, heavy, jangling, fell to the floor. For a split second, time froze. Every eye in the block locked on those keys. One inmate lunged. The clang of metal hitting metal rang louder than the sirens. The keys were gone. And with them, the balance of power inside Rikers shifted. The prison had just crossed a line it could never uncross. The keys to chaos. At first, nobody moved. The inmate who snatched the keys stuffed them deep into his jumpsuit, his eyes darting left and right. Guards shouted, "Lock it down! Lock it down!" But the damage was already done. Everyone inside that block knew the truth. A prisoner now held the power to open doors. Whispers traveled faster than the alarms. Inmates tapped codes on the pipes, sending the message down the tiers. We got the keys. For a few hours, the prison seemed calm again. The block was quiet, almost too quiet. Guards walked the tiers with uneasy eyes, knowing something was coming but not knowing when. Then, without warning, the silence shattered. One cell door clicked open. Then another, and another. Metal creaked and slammed as locks turned one by one. Suddenly, men were pouring into the hallway, fists clenched, eyes burning. The guards froze, outnumbered, outmaneuvered. The inmates weren't just free from their cells, they were ready for war. The island was about to explode. The uprising begins. The hallways filled with thunder. Dozens of inmates stormed out, their voices echoing like a battle cry. Some had makeshift weapons, shanks carved from plastic, sharpened metal hidden for weeks. Others simply carried rage, enough to swing fists at anyone in their way. Guards tried to form a line, batons raised, shields locked together. But the wave of prisoners was too strong. One guard went down, then another. Radios crackled, calling for backup. Emergency in Block C. We need all units, now. The air was thick with smoke from burning trash cans. The fire alarm screamed, but nobody could tell the difference between alarm and chaos anymore. In the middle of it all, one inmate, the same man who had grabbed the keys, pushed forward. His eyes were fixed on the heavy doors at the end of the corridor, the ones that led deeper into the jail's restricted zones. Every step he took wasn't just about freedom. It was about control, and if he could reach that door, Rikers itself might fall into the hands of the inmates. But standing between him and that door was a wall of guards, and they weren't moving. Clash at the gate. The corridor shook with the sound of boots pounding on concrete. Guards braced themselves, shields pressed tight, batons in hand. On the other side, inmates roared like a storm, rushing forward as if nothing could stop them. The first crash sounded like thunder. Fists, shanks, and bodies slammed against shields. The guards shoved back, forming a human wall. But for every inmate that fell, two more pushed forward. Blood splattered across the floor, radios dropped, and the smell of sweat and smoke mixed into a choking haze. One inmate broke through the line, slashing wildly with a sharpened toothbrush. Another swung a broken mop handle, cracking it against a guard's helmet. But then the moment came, the man with the keys, shoving his way through the crowd. He held them high, metal glinting under the fluorescent lights. The guards saw it. They knew what those keys meant. And when he rammed the first key into the lock of the restricted gate, the sound of it turning sent a chill through everyone's spine. The gate creaked open. The prison had just crossed into full-scale rebellion. The flooded halls. The gate swung wide, and the sound echoed like a victory bell. Inmates poured through, sprinting into parts of Rikers few prisoners ever set foot in. The restricted halls were supposed to be secure, off-limits, guarded with extra locks. Now, they were wide open. Some men ran for freedom, searching for exits they'd only dreamed about. Others saw a different prize: control, offices, supply rooms, guard stations, places filled with radios, uniforms, even weapons if they were lucky. Alarms blared across the entire island. Red lights flashed. Over the intercom, a voice shouted, "Lockdown! Full lockdown!" But it was too late. The halls were crawling with inmates, their voices echoing off the walls, drowning out orders from above. One group dragged a guard into a corner, demanding codes to more doors. Another smashed cameras with broomsticks, cutting off the eyes watching from control rooms. And deep inside, in the shadows of the chaos, the man with the keys grinned. For the first time, it wasn't guards who ran the island. It was him. But what he didn't know was that someone else, an old rival gang, was watching closely, ready to make their own move. The fight wasn't just about escaping anymore. It was about who would rule Rikers from the inside. Gangs in the shadows. The chaos was no longer one wave. It split into many. Different crews claimed different hallways like territories in a war zone. The Latin Kings rallied in the kitchen, turning pots and pans into weapons. The Bloods controlled the gym, using weights as hammers. The Crips gathered in the chapel, the stained glass flickering red under the danger lights. At first, it looked like unity against the guards. But unity never lasts long in Rikers. Old beefs don't die, they wait. And in the smoke and shouting, one gang spotted the man with the keys. They wanted them. Whispers turned to threats. Threats turned to shoves. And suddenly, inmates weren't just fighting the guards anymore. They were fighting each other. Shanks flashed in the dark. Fists cracked jaws, and the sound of betrayal echoed louder than the alarms. The guards watched from behind barricades, realizing the inmates were tearing themselves apart. But that didn't make it safer. It made it worse. Because if the gangs got their hands on those keys, control of Rikers wouldn't just be chaos. It would be war. And in the middle of it all, the man with the keys clutched them tighter, knowing everyone, guards, gangs, and even his own crew, would kill to take them from him. The rebellion had just turned into a battlefield. Blood on the concrete. The shouting turned to screams as the gangs collided in the middle of the hallway. Men swung broomsticks, pipes, and fists like weapons in a street war trap behind walls. Blood splattered across the floor, the white tiles turning slick under stomping boots. The man with the keys tried to push through, but hands grabbed at him from every side. One inmate swung a shank at his ribs. Another tackled him to the ground. The keys clattered against the floor, echoing louder than the alarms. In an instant, the fight became a frenzy. Dozens of men dug at the keys, rolling over each other, punching, clawing, biting. Whoever held them would rule the rebellion. Whoever lost them might not live to see the next day. A guard watching from behind the barricade raised his radio. "Control! They've lost it. The inmates are killing each other for keys." The camera room went black as another group smashed the last working security monitors. Now, no one outside knew who had the keys or what door would open next. And in that chaos, one figure rose from the pile, keys gripped tight in his bloody fist. He raised them high, his face smeared with sweat and rage, shouting, "Rikers is ours now." The riot wasn't just out of control. It had found its new leader, the escape dream. The man clutching the keys stood tall above the chaos. His voice carried through the cell block like a general on the battlefield. "Follow me, and we'll walk out of here tonight." Dozens of inmates roared in agreement. The gangs, once enemies, hesitated. The promise of freedom was bigger than their grudges. For a moment, rival colors stood side by side, their eyes locked on one goal, escape. They moved quickly. Keys jingled as doors swung wide. Hallways once sealed shut now, open like veins running through the prison. Inmates streamed into medical wings, storage rooms, even staff corridors they had only heard about in whispers. One group found guard uniforms stuffed in lockers. They slipped them on, laughing, pretending to bark orders. Another gang raided the kitchen, grabbing knives sharper than anything they had smuggled in. And then came the most dangerous discovery, the loading dock. Beyond those gates lay delivery trucks, the road, and beyond that, the city. The leader raised the keys again, pointing to the heavy gate. "We break through this. Rikers is finished." But before they could make their move, the ground shook with the sound of heavy boots. Reinforcements had arrived. Dozens of guards in riot gear marched in formation, shields gleaming, tear gas canisters in hand. The battle for Rikers was about to become a war zone. War at the dock. The metal doors rattled as the riot team stormed in. Helmets gleamed under the flickering fluorescent lights. Shields locked in a wall of steel. The air filled with the sharp hiss of tear gas canisters. Smoke rolling across the floor like a fog of war. Inmates coughed and staggered, but they didn't back down. They charged with raw fury, swinging stolen knives, mop handles, and fists. The clang of metal against shields thundered through the dock as if the whole building was shaking apart. One inmate in a stolen guard uniform tried to blend in and grab the exit, but baton cracked across his back, dropping him to the ground. Another prisoner hurled a chair through the air, smashing against a shield with a deafening crash. The leader with the keys roared above the chaos, shoving men forward. "Don't stop. Push through them." The clash turned brutal. Guards slammed batons into ribs. Inmates fought back with anything they could grab. Blood pooled on the concrete, the air choking with gas and screams. And then, just as it seemed the guard were holding the line, an explosion rocked the dock. A trash can packed with burning rags went off like a bomb, flames licking the ceiling. Both sides froze for a split second as fire tore through the smoke. The fight wasn't just about freedom anymore. It was survival. Fire in the belly of Rikers. The dock lit up in a blaze. Flames curled up the walls, swallowing banners and pipes in orange heat. Smoke poured into every hallway, thick and suffocating, stinging eyes and burning lungs. Guards stumbled back, shields rattling, coughing through their gas masks. Inmates, wild with adrenaline, pushed forward to the haze, some using the smoke as cover to slip past the barricades. Others were not so lucky. Men collapsed, choking on the thick black clouds, their screams drowned by the roar of the fire. Sprinklers sputtered weakly overhead, but the water couldn't keep up. Sparks rained down from broken lights, turning the chaos into a storm of fire and steel. The leader with the keys staggered forward, clutching his prize in one hand, pulling others with the other. Through the fire, "Keep moving," he shouted, his voice half swallowed by the roar. But with every step, the heat grew worse. Doors warped under the flames, locks melted, and the concrete itself began to crack from pressure. The dock, the only path toward freedom, was turning into a burning trap. And just as the leader shoved the key into the final gate, ready to swing it open, the ceiling above groaned. A piece of burning steel broke loose, crashing the floor with a deafening slam, blocking the way out. The escape was seconds from reality, and now it was buried under fire. Betrayal in the smoke. The flames roared higher, painting the walls red. The loading dock was no longer just a battleground. It was a furnace. Prisoners hacked and coughed, eyes burning, sweat pouring down their faces. Some turned back, desperate to find air. Others screamed at the leader to push forward. But the block gate left only two choices: fight to the fire or fight each other. That's when it happened. In the chaos, one of the leader's own crew lunged at him, his hand clawed for keys, his eyes wild with greed. "You're going to get us killed." "I'll get us out," he shouted, trying to rip them free. The leader shoved back, but another inmate joined the struggle. Then another. The men who had sworn loyalty a few minutes ago were now turning on him, their fists and blades flashing in the smoke. Guards, watching from behind the barricades, didn't dare move closer. They could only hear the screams and see shadows fighting through the firelight. And in the middle of it, the keys slipped, clanging against the floor again, sparks flying as they skittered across the burning concrete. Hands dug for them, shoving, stabbing, clawing. Smoke swallowed the scene until nothing was clear, except one thing. Whoever crawled out of that fire holding those keys would decide the fate of Rikers. Out of the smoke. The dock was an inferno. Smoke rolled so thick you could barely see shapes moving inside it, just shadows twisting, grappling, stabbing. The clash of metal, the screams of men, the crash of fallen debris, it all blended into one nightmare. Then silence. For a moment, the fighting stopped. The only sound was a crackle of flames and the hiss of sprinklers spitting useless streams of water. Out of the smoke, a figure stumbled forward. His jumpsuit was scorched, his arm cut open and bleeding, but in his fist, shining under the flicker of fire, were the keys. The other inmates froze. Some gasped, others cursed. This wasn't the original leader. The man who stepped out wasn't the strongest fighter or the loudest voice. He was one of the quiet ones. A man who had waited, hidden in the shadows, letting the others tear each other apart. Now, with blood dripping from his knuckles and the keys dangling at his side, he raised his head and smiled through the smoke. "Follow me," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the chaos like a blade. And one by one, the inmates fell in behind him. But as they pushed deeper into the prison, ready to try another path to freedom, they didn't know the guard had regrouped. Riot squads lined the next corridor, shields locked, tasers humming. The new leader had the keys, but the guards had the numbers. The next clash would decide who ruled Rikers at night. Steel versus flesh. The corridor shook as boots pounded from both ends. On one side, the inmates surged forward behind their new leader, weapons raised, voices echoing in fury. On the other, the riot squad advanced in perfect formation, shields locked tight, batons and tasers crackling with electric sparks. The first collision sounded like a car crash. Inmates slammed against shields, fists and shanks bouncing off steel. Guards shoved back, driving men into the walls. The air filled with grunts, screams, and the sharp crack of electricity as tasers struck bodies. One inmate swung a stolen kitchen knife, sparks flying as it scraped across a guard shield. Another tried to leap over the line, only to be yanked down and pinned by 3 officers. The new leader charged into the fight, keys wrapped around his fist like brass knuckles. He cracked a guard across the helmet, dropping him to the floor. With every swing, the inmates roared louder, rallying behind him, but the guards weren't breaking. They moved like a machine, shoving, striking, shocking. Step by step, they pushed the mob back, grinding them against the burning walls of the dock. Still, the new leader refused to let go. He lifted the keys high, blood dripping from his arm, and screamed, "We own this island." And at that exact moment, the lights went out. The corridor plunged into total darkness. Only the fire's glow remained. Darkness falls. The lights snapped off like someone had killed the sun. 1 second the hallway was chaos under white glare. The next it was swallowed in blackness. Only the flicker of fire painted twisted shadows on the walls. For a moment, both sides froze. Guards tightened their shields. Inmates clutched their weapons, hearts pounding in the dark. Then came the sound, boots scraping, shouts echoing, fists slamming against unseen targets. The riot turned blind. A taser crackled, its blue sparks cutting a line through the smoke. A scream followed as someone collapsed. Somewhere else, metal clanged against concrete, shanks stabbing at shadows. No one knew if they were hitting an enemy or their own crew. Inmates stumbled, coughing, clawing their way through the dark. Guards swung wildly, radios useless, orders drowning confusion. The new leader moved like a ghost, slipping through the fight with the keys clenched tight. His men followed the sound of his voice as he barked orders. "This way! Follow me!" But the darkness played tricks. Another voice echoed down the hall, mocking him, shouting, "Over here! He's over here!" Rival gangs, unseen, hunting the man with the keys. Every second in the blackness was a gamble, freedom, betrayal, or death. And then, with a sudden click, the backup generators roared to life. The lights blasted back on. And what they revealed in that corridor was worse than the dark. The light reveals. The corridor snapped back to life in blinding white. For a second, everyone blinked, stunned by the sudden glare. And then the scene became clear. The floor was a battlefield. Dozens of bodies lay twisted across the concrete. Guards groaning in pain, inmates bleeding, shanks scattered like bones. Smoke curled from broken tasers, and blood mixed with sprinkler water into a dark river that snaked down the hall. But the most shocking sight was at the center. The new leader stood tall, chest heaving, keys still in his hand. Around him, his closest men formed a ring, bruised and bloody but unbroken. They had fought through the blackout and survived. Across from them, the riot squad was shaken. Their shield wall was shattered, helmets cracked, uniforms ripped. For the first time, the guards weren't advancing. They were falling back. And in that moment, everyone inside Rikers realized the truth. The inmates were winning. A cheer erupted from the cell blocks, voices thundering to the prison like an earthquake. Freedom! 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 The chant grew louder, shaking the very walls. The new leader raised the keys above his head, blood dripping onto the floor, and shouted, "Tonight, Rikers is ours." But as his words echoed through the island, another sound cut through the air, deeper, heavier, colder. The thump of helicopters. The outside world was coming, and they weren't coming to negotiate. The sky above Rikers. The thump of helicopter blades rattled the ceiling, shaking dust loose from the vents. Searchlights slashed through the night, cutting across the burning rooftops of Rikers Island. From the inside, inmates pressed against barred windows, their faces glowing white under the beams. From the outside, New Yorkers finally saw it, smoke rising from the East River like a warning flare. Then came the voice, a deep, commanding boom from the loudspeakers of Chopper. "This is the NYPD. Stand down immediately. Anyone outside their cells will be subdued with force." The warning wasn't negotiation, it was a promise. On the ground, armored vans roared onto the island, their engines growling like beasts. SWAT teams in black gear spilled out, rifles in hand, helmets gleaming. They moved with precision, cutting through fences, stacking at doors, ready to storm the prison block by block. Inside, the inmates heard the boots, the radios, the metal clicks of weapons being loaded. Some froze, fear breaking through their rage. Others grinned, desperate enough to take their chances against an army. The new leader tightened his grip on the keys. His eyes burned as he stared at the gates ahead, the only path between him and the world outside. The choice was clear: fight until the last breath or be crushed under the full weight of the city. And as the first flashbang exploded through the hallway, blinding white light swallowing the chaos, the war for Rikers truly began. The last stand. The flashbang burst like lightning, shaking the walls. Inmates stumbled, blinded, ears ringing from the thunderous blast. Then came the flood. SWAT officers in black armor storming through the smoke, shields raised, rifles aimed. The corridor turned into a battlefield. Bullets weren't flying, but the force was no less brutal. Rubber rounds slammed into chests, tasers cracked against skin, and batons fell like hammers. Prisoners screamed as tear gas filled the air, choking every breath. Still, the inmates didn't give up. With nothing but rage and desperation, they charged. A man swung a broken pipe, only to be slammed to ground by a riot shield. Another tried to stab with a shank, but a rubber bullet dropped him to his knees. At the center of it all, the new leader fought like a man possessed. Keys wrapped around his fist. He threw punches at split helmets, his roar echoing louder than the alarms. Around him, his crew stood shoulder to shoulder, refusing to let go of their dream of freedom. SWAT pressed harder. Step by step, the line of black helmets pushed the mob back, pressing them toward the burning dock. Every inch of ground was paid in blood and screams. Then chaos split the air. A gunshot, not rubber, not controlled. A real one. Both sides froze. Smoke swirled. Someone had fired a live round inside Rikers Island, and the fight had just crossed a line no one could take back. The shot, that changed everything. The crack of the bullet echoed like thunder. For a heartbeat, the chaos froze. Smoke hung heavy, lights flickered, and every eye turned toward the sound. A guard stumbled back, clutching his shoulder, blood spilling between his fingers. He dropped to the floor, groaning. The prison had rules, even in riots, but that shot shattered them. This wasn't just a rebellion anymore. This was war. SWAT tightened their grips, rifles snapping up to their shoulders. Orders blasted through radios. Live fire authorized or threatened. Repeat, live fire authorized. Inmates panicked. Some dropped their weapons, backing away with hands raised. Others doubled down, convinced that surrender meant death. The hallway split in two, men begging for mercy, and men charging with nothing left to lose. The new leader stood in the middle, chest heaving, sweat dripping into his eyes. He looked at the bleeding guard, then at the keys in his hand. Freedom was still inches away, but the price had just multiplied. He shouted to his crew, "No turning back! This is our only shot." The men roared and pushed forward into a storm of shields and bullets. And then, just as the clash exploded again, another sound ripped through the prison. Deeper than gunfire, louder than the riot itself. The walls trembled. The ceiling lights swung. The entire island shook. It wasn't just Rikers burning now. Something else, something bigger, had just gone wrong. The island trembles. The ground rumbled beneath their feet. At first, everyone thought it was just the chaos of the fight. The boots, the batons, the bodies slamming against concrete. But then the walls groaned, dust rained from the ceiling, and the lights flickered violently. The inmates stopped mid-charge. The guards froze in formation. Even the helicopters circling above wavered in the smoky air. Then it came, a deafening roar from deep below the prison. The floor shook so hard men stumbled, crashing into each other. Somewhere under the dock, something had exploded. Pipes burst, blasting scalding steam through the hallways. Sprinklers snapped and spewed water in every direction. Alarms screamed over one another, a chorus of sirens no one could understand. The fire, already raging, grew wilder, feeding on broken gas lines. Flames curled along the ceiling, eating through steel, turning the prison into a furnace. And then came the sound that turned fear into panic, the creak of collapsing concrete. A section of the dock's roof caved in, crashing to the ground with a thunderous smash. Men scattered, screaming, crushed beneath falling debris. The new leader staggered through the smoke, clutching the keys, his face pale as the prison itself seemed to come apart around him. This wasn't just a riot anymore. Rikers Island was breaking apart. Scramble for survival. The prison shook like a beast waking from its sleep. Concrete split, pipes burst, and flames leapt higher, swallowing everything in their path. Men who only minutes ago were fighting to escape now fought just to stay alive. Inmates dropped their weapons, shoving and clawing to find safe ground. Some tried to kick open locked doors, screaming for air as the smoke thickened. Guards who had been swinging batons now reached out to pull fallen men from under rubble. Survival instincts overpowering uniforms and rivalries. The riot dissolved into chaos. No sides, no order, just a storm of bodies running in every direction. The new leader, still clutching the keys, stumbled toward a side hallway, dragging two of his crew behind him. His eyes locked on a heavy service door at the far end. If he could open it, maybe there was still a path out. Maybe freedom hadn't turned to ash. But before he could reach it, another collapse roared overhead. A massive slab of ceiling crashed down, blocking the hallway. The blast of debris threw men across the floor, like rag dolls. The leader was slammed against the wall, his hands trembling, the keys nearly slipping from his grip. Behind him, the fire raged. Ahead of him, the path was gone. And around him, both guards and inmates screamed as the island itself crumbled. For the first time, he realized something chilling. The greatest enemy wasn't the guards or the gangs. It was Rikers itself. Enemies turned allies. The air was thick with smoke, every breath a struggle. The fire snapped like whips along the walls, and the ground trembled with each new collapse. The guards, shields dented and uniforms scorched, backed into a corner. Inmates surrounded them, faces streaked with sweat and ash. For a moment, it looked like the fight would start again. Weapons were raised, fists clenched, eyes burning with rage. Then another ceiling beam crashed down, crushing the floor where they all would have been standing seconds earlier. Sparks sprayed like fireworks. The building groaned, louder this time, as if the entire dock was ready to cave. The truth hit everyone at once. If they kept fighting, no one was making out alive. One guard ripped off his gas mask, coughing, and shouted, "We work together or we all die here." For a heartbeat, silence. Then the new leader stepped forward, the keys dangling from his bloody hand. His eyes locked on the guards. "Fine," he said, voice hoarse, "but I lead the way." Against all odds, enemies formed a fragile truce. Guards and inmates lifted rubble together, dragged the injured out of the smoke, and searched for any door still standing. Every second mattered, because the fire was spreading and the walls were ready to fall. But as they pushed deeper into the prison, one question lingered like the smoke. When survival is at stake, how long can enemies really trust each other? Trust on the edge. The group moved fast through the smoke-filled corridors, guards and inmates side by side, their footsteps echoing like a desperate heartbeat. Every door they passed was either melted shut or buried under rubble. The prison was becoming a maze of fire and broken concrete. The new leader kept the keys tight in his grip, leading the way. Behind him, guards shouted directions. Try to remember which routes led to service tunnels and which ended in dead ends. For a few moments, it seemed impossible it happened. Rivals working together for survival. But survival breeds desperation. As they reached the locked steel door, one guard stepped forward, his eyes locked on the keys. "Give them to me. You don't know which one fits." The leader's crew tensed, their hands twitching near shanks hidden in their jumpsuits. The leader smirked through the smoke. "If I hand these over, you'll leave us here burn. No chance." The hallway went silent. Guards on one side, inmates on the other, both ready to break the fragile truce. Fire popped and crackled behind them like a ticking clock. Finally, the leader shoved a key into the lock. It jammed. He tried another, then another. Nothing. Sweat poured down his face. The smoke grew thicker. Then, click, the door swung open. But before anyone could celebrate, a guard shoved the leader hard, trying to rip the keys from his hand. The fragile alliance shattered in an instant. Fists and weapons rose again, rage flooding back stronger than fear. And this time, with the flames closing in, betrayal could mean the end for everyone. Fire and betrayal. The shove sent the leader crashing against the wall, sparks from the fire raining down around him. The keys slipped, dangling from his wrist by the chain. His crew lunged forward, shanks flashing, but the guards swung their batons to keep them back. The fragile alliance collapsed in seconds. Inmates screamed, charging through the narrow hallway. Guards slammed shields into bodies, the clang echoing like war drums. One man fell into the flames, his scream cut short as smoke swallowed him. Another was crushed under a collapsing beam, his body pinned while the fight raged on around him. The leader clawed to his feet, blood dripping down his temple. He slammed his shoulder into the guard who tried to take the keys, knocking him flat on the ground. "These stay with me," he roared, his voice breaking through the chaos. The corridor became a nightmare. Fire at their backs, betrayal at their throats, and rubble blocking the way forward. The air was so thick with smoke it felt like breathing knives. And then came the sound none of them wanted to hear. Another explosion deep in the prison. The ground shook, the walls cracked, and the entire hallway tilted as if the island itself was sinking. Men, guards, and inmates alike stumbled, some dropping weapons, others grabbing onto pipes to keep from falling. The fire roared louder, hungrily chasing them. The fight wasn't just about trust anymore. It was about who could survive Rikers collapsing under their feet. Collapse of the hall. The hallway groaned like a dying beast. Cracks split the walls, dust raining down in thick clouds. Every step shook beneath their feet, the floor tilting as if the whole island was sliding into the river. Guards and inmates alike dropped their weapons, panic overtaking rage. They shoved past each other, clawing for space, coughing through the smoke that clawed at their lungs. The fire behind them roared louder, chasing them like a predator. The new leader staggered forward, dragging two of his crew by the arms. The keys clinked in his hand, heavy and slick with blood. He jammed one into another door. It stuck. Another. Wrong again. His hands trembled. "Come on! Come on!" he shouted. Every second a death sentence. Behind him, a guard barked. "Move! We're not dying in this tunnel." He slammed his baton against the door, desperate to break it down. Another guard aimed a shotgun loaded with rubber rounds and fired, the blast echoing to the collapsing hall. The lock snapped. The door swung open just as the ceiling gave way. A wall of concrete crashed down where they had been standing seconds earlier, crushing men under tons of rubble. Screams were swallowed in an instant. The survivors shoved through the doorway, tumbling into a narrow service tunnel. For a moment it felt like escape, dark, tight, but alive. But as the smoke cleared, their hope turned to dread. The tunnel didn't lead outside. It sloped downward, deeper into the island's underbelly. They hadn't escaped the prison. They'd gone further into its belly, into the belly of the beast. The service tunnel stretched into darkness, the walls dripping with condensation, pipes rattling overhead. The survivors stumbled forward, guards limping with bruised ribs, inmates coughing blood, the new leader clutching the keys like they were his last breath. The air was different down here. Heavy, stale. Every step echoed too loudly, as if something deeper was listening. "Where the hell are we?" one guard muttered, his flashlight beam slicing through the gloom. The light caught graffiti scrawled on the walls. Names, gang signs, messages left by men long forgotten. Some of the paint looked decades old. "This isn't on the maps," another whispered. The leader smirked through the smoke, clinging to his teeth. "That's because they don't want you to know about it." The deeper they went, the stranger became. Old storage cages, rusted beds, and broken chains bolted into the walls. It wasn't just a tunnel. It looked like an abandoned block, cells buried beneath the prison, hidden from sight. The guards shifted nervously. Even the toughest inmates fell quiet. The silence pressing heavy, broken only by the drip of water and the hiss of unseen pipes. Then they saw it. Another door. Heavy, rusted, its lock older than the rest, as if it hadn't been opened in years. The leader grinned, raising the keys. "You see? This place has more secrets than anyone up top will ever admit. And now," he slid a key into the lock, twisting slowly, "we're about to uncover what Rikers really is." The lock snapped open with a screech. The door groaned as it swung wide, and what waited beyond the threshold made even the bravest stop cold. The forgotten block. The rusted door scraped open, the sound grinding against their ears like nails on steel. A wave of stale air rushed out, thick with dust and something else, something sour like decay. The flashlight beams cut into the dark chamber beyond. What they revealed froze everyone in place. Rows of tiny cells, far smaller than any upstairs. Rusted bars bent inward, like cages built to crush men instead of hold them. Chains hung from the ceiling, some broken, others still bolted to iron rings in the floor. Scraps of bedding, gnawed and rotting, clung to the corners. One guard whispered, his voice trembling, "This is on the blueprints. This place shouldn't exist." The new leader stepped inside, his boots crunching on old bones scattered across the ground. Real bones. Human bones. "This," he said quietly, almost in awe, "is what no one tells you about Rikers." Inmates muttered, crossing themselves, some backing away in fear. Even hardened gang members looked shaken, their bravado stripped away by the sight of a place that felt more like a tomb than a prison. The guards glanced at each other, pale under the flashlight glare. They knew the rumors, that Rikers had buried its darkest history deep underground, solitary blocks that disappeared off the records, inmates who went in but never came out. Now, standing in the middle of it, they realized the truth wasn't just rumor. The island wasn't just on fire. It was haunted by its own secrets. And as the group stood frozen in the forgotten block, another sound crawled up from the darkness. Footsteps. But they weren't alone. Footsteps in the dark. The sound echoed to the chamber. Slow, deliberate steps scraping against the concrete. Everyone froze, their eyes darting to the shadows beyond the flashlight beams. The leader tightened his grip on the keys. Guards raised their batons. Inmates clutched their makeshift shanks, though their hands trembled more than they'd admit. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Then a figure emerged from the darkness. An old man, beard tangled in gray, eyes hollow like he hadn't seen daylight in decades. His prison uniform was shredded, stained, hanging loose on a skeletal frame. Gasps rippled through the group. One of the guards whispered, "That's impossible. He was supposed to be dead." The old man raised a hand, shielding his face from the sudden glare of the flashlight. His voice came out broken, dry, but clear enough to shake everyone's bones. "They left me here." The silence after his words was heavier than the smoke upstairs. Even the fire's roar above felt far away. The inmates exchanged looks, fear, confusion, disbelief. Was this man a survivor of Rikers' hidden block? How long had he been down here? And how many others were buried in the dark? Before anyone could speak again, more sounds stirred. Chains rattled deeper in the chamber. Shapes moved in the shadows. Too many to count. The truth hit like a punch to the gut. The old man wasn't alone. Whatever secrets Rikers had buried in its belly were about to wake. Secrets that refused to die. The chamber filled with movement. Dozens of figures crept out from the shadows. Men gaunt and broken, their faces pale like ghosts. Some dragged chains still locked to their ankles. Others squinted against the flashlight, as if blinded by its touch. Inmates and guards alike stumbled back, horror painted across their faces. The leader gripped the keys tighter, his confidence slipping. These weren't just prisoners. They were the forgotten, the erased. Men abandoned in the belly of Rikers, hidden from the world above. One of the guards whispered, shaking. They said this block was shut down 40 years ago. The old man stepped closer, eyes burning with something between madness and memory. His voice cracked like drywood. "They locked us here and threw away the key, but you brought it back." The leader stared at the ring of keys in his hand, realizing the weight he carried wasn't just freedom. It was history, buried under lies. The walls groaned again, dust falling from the ceiling. The fire above spread faster, feeding on the broken shell of the prison. The entire island was collapsing, flames consuming its secrets, shaking as if it wanted to erase itself. Survivors from above screamed for escape. The forgotten men below reached out like shadows. And in the middle of it all, the leader clutched the keys, torn between doors that led out and doors that should have never been opened. The truth about Rikers wasn't just about riots, gangs, or guards. It was about the secrets buried beneath, the things no one was supposed to see. And tonight, those secrets have been unleashed. The island that keeps its secrets. Rikers Island has always been more than a jail. It's a city of walls, a world of shadows, a place where truth bends and justice often disappears. On the surface, it looks like cells and fences. But inside, deep inside, it holds stories no one was ever meant to uncover. The riot, the fire, the betrayals, all of it was chaos. But chaos is only part of the truth. The real horror lies in what's hidden, what's buried, and what the island refuses to let go of. And maybe that's the most chilling part, because whether you're a guard, an inmate, or just someone watching from the outside, Rikers doesn't just break bodies. It swallows secrets whole. And sometimes, those secrets claw their way back out.